Hello guys and welcome to week 3 of Word 110. I hope you guys are hanging in there. I know this is when the semester starts to pick up. So I wanted to remind you all of Canvas and making sure that every single week you're checking in on modules to see all of the things that you'll need to complete this week's assignments. And you'll see the weeks are getting a little bit heavier as we're getting into the meat of what we're going to be discussing this semester. So do make sure you're keeping up with that, not leaving it till the last minute. And this particular lecture is going to be to accompany the rhetorical strategies and audience PowerPoint. So if you want to follow along or reread it afterwards, that is where you'll find it. All right, let's get into the presentation. All right. So, rhetoric is just a fancy way of saying effective or persuasive speaking or writing. And you'll hear me talk a lot about the rhetorical situation. That's going to be essentially the situation surrounding whatever rhetoric you're looking at. So it's going to contain people, events, objects, and relationships that seem to be related through some problem that could potentially be solved through presenting an argument to the right audience. So basically, you're going to be looking at someone else's argument about your topic that you're interested in researching for the semester, and you're going to be looking at who the audience is for that and why or why not that rhetoric is effective at reaching that audience. Also, you'll probably hear my cat and see my cat throughout this. Many apologies. Okay. All right, so rhetoric is a lot of different things. It can be something like a poem. You'll look at that for your practice analysis. It can be a speech. We all just got through the Democratic and Republican National Conventions. Those are all speeches where politicians are trying to convince you to believe something and support whatever candidate that they want you to support. You could look at a novel. A novel is often trying to get some opinion across. Lots and lots of things are counting as rhetoric, and so you have a lot of options to choose from when you're looking at the specific rhetoric or argument that you're going to analyze for your rhetorical analysis. My computer is taking forever today. All right, so audience. That's the first thing that we want to determine in order to do our rhetorical analysis. And there's two different types of audiences that I'm talking about when I say audience. So the first is the general public audience. Pretty much every piece of rhetoric you look at can be received by a generalized public audience because it's published online or it is broadcast, live streamed. This is basically unhelpful to you. It's way too broad, and you're not going to be able to make any arguments about how their specific rhetoric is made or tailored to reach a specific audience, which is what you'll want to be able to do with your rhetorical analysis. So you'll want to look at the target audience. So this is the audience that you envision when you construct your rhetoric, the audience that you hope for or expect, and the audience that you intend to persuade. So this is often, if it's a speech, maybe the people sitting in the audience. That's who you want to persuade. It's really easy to determine that with speeches, maybe less so for other things like advertisements. You have to look at, well, who is the target audience of this brand? Maybe because they use this sort of technology in their advertisement, they specifically want to reach millennials and younger who are more in tune with technology. That's the sort of audience analysis that you want to be doing. So there are different examples here of audiences. I already mentioned a crowd at a speech. It could be the readers of a book, the target audience of commercial, like I said, or maybe an ad, a political ad specifically targets citizens who are affected by different issues, like maybe specifically veterans or specifically educators. That would be a good example of a target audience. The next thing you want to think about is exigence. Now, that's a big fancy word, but it basically just means the issue at hand, the catalyst for writing, or the problem at hand. So it's the why. Why are you writing or making this piece of rhetoric? And you want to think about questions about your audience. Everything's always connected back to audience. So will your audience also think this is a significant issue? Do you need to give some context for why it is significant? Is it something that affects them? And how will the story you tell benefit them? And your exigence is really important in thinking about yourself. Why am I writing about this issue? Why is it important to me? And timeliness. What's going on in the world that makes me think this is the issue that I need to be writing about right now? You also want to think about constraints. So these are things that limit how you can construct your rhetoric, or external factors that impact how an audience might receive the message. So there's genre constraints surrounding how you're writing this thing or how you're communicating it. There's material constraints, only so much can fit on a piece of paper, only so much can be shown on a recorded video, for instance. And there's also cultural constraints, so thinking about what's acceptable to say or not say in a specific cultural scenario in your society. So you need to consider context. So social, historical background that informs the exigence. And thinking about context too, what kind of genres does your audience respond to? How can you best reach them by using that specific genre? So next we'll move into rhetorical appeals. So these are how everyone always appeals to an audience when they're trying to convince them of something or argue. The first one that we'll look at is pathos. So this is an argument based on emotions, desires, values, feelings, and beliefs. This advertisement, I'll have you watch when you go through this yourself. But basically, it's a drunk driving advertisement that's actually put on by a beer company, which is interesting. It's complicated. So after watching that advertisement, go back and think about these questions about what problem is this ad addressing. I already gave it away as drunk driving. Who might the target audience be? Since this is a commercial, think about who is the brand who is putting out this commercial and what's their target audience. How does this ad make you feel? Be specific, don't just say, it makes me feel sad. Why does it make you feel that way, do you think? What visuals are going on in the ad that make you feel that? What words are being used? And then lastly, this ad uses more than one rhetorical appeal, which is basically the case with any sort of artifact that you're looking at. So I want you to think about, when you go back and watch that ad, after reading about logos and ethos, what other rhetorical appeal do you think that this ad uses? So the second type of rhetorical appeal is logos. So this is an argument based on facts, evidence, and reason. So I have here an example of Greta Thunberg's speech at the UN Climate Action Summit. That was almost a full year ago. So if you watch that, or if you want to read the transcript, I have that link too. I have similar questions about how she uses facts to her advantage in this speech in order to effectively address her target audience. So if you want to go back, answer these questions here as you're thinking about audience and thinking about how she combines, I'll give it away, pathos and logos in order to reach that audience. And you might think about too her context as a really young girl who has been forced into this position of influence and weirdly power in order to give this speech at the UN. The last rhetorical appeal is ethos, and this is where the writer or speaker presents themselves as credible, trustworthy, honest, and or ethical. So I have here a really recent commercial from Dove that they titled "Courage is Beautiful," and you can see here just from the little preview on YouTube that it's about first line healthcare workers in the pandemic. So this is going to be really applicable for a lot of you guys who are thinking about COVID-19 in your topics, maybe looking at an advertisement that deals with COVID-19 that might relate to your topic in some way, and seeing how those arguments are being formulated and what kind of rhetorical appeals they're relying on. So I think Dove really uses ethos to its advantage here in this ad, and thinking about why did they center frontline healthcare workers? How does that make you want to buy Dove products? And like, why is there a perfect exigence for this commercial airing in April 2020? So when you're writing, you want to think about your audience's values, their interests, and what stakes they have in the topic or argument. You want to think about how specific can I get my target audience? Can I narrow them all the way down to someone as specific as this is for millennial moms, for example. What do they need to know? What kind of context do they need to understand my argument? What will appeal to them? What genre is the best to use to persuade your audience? Maybe you might look at a campaign video and you might argue about why that video was much better for this political campaign than just a press release. And then think about what won't work when addressing this audience. And you might think about generational divides, cultural divides, racial divides, and why certain things work for certain audiences. And this is some good, these are some good resources for you to use if you want to learn more about this and strengthen your understanding, specifically the town branch in chapters 1 and 2. I encourage you to look at that, and we'll have some reading for that next week as well. All right, so that is that, and you'll go through after you want to look back and rewatch those videos. Go ahead and look at the practice rhetorical analysis PowerPoint and the practice homework. And then finally, you'll be pitching your narrowed down research question this week. So if you want to read over that, read over the assignment sheet, which I put here, and I'll go over in more detail next week as we write our first draft of the rhetorical analysis. Okay, so if there are any questions, make sure you email me or send me a message through Canvas, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Otherwise, have a really great week. I'll see you guys next week.